Good to see you both, Slav and David Blackmon.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good afternoon, Arena.
Good afternoon.
3 days ago, Elon Musk was in Brazil and met the Brazilian president Jair Bolsonaro. It was very interesting. They made agreements on Starlink, internet, monitoring Amazon, and other investments in the country, without any correlation, of course. Some days before, Tesla was excluded from ESG top 10 list from a consulting company. And David wrote an article in Forbes yesterday about this subject. David, please, could you please tell us, says what means when Elon Musk says ESG is a huge scam?
Well, I've kind of had that feeling about it for 16 years now. Since the company I was working for in 2006 got its first letter from an ESG investor firm demanding that it take all these actions to build an annual sustainability report and make all sorts of changes to its operations. And, when our CEO asked me for my advice, I told him I thought we should just throw the letter into the trash can and not respond. And that's what every company should do, because this is clearly a bunch of activists who have made inroads into a big investment firm, and they will make constantly escalating demands every year. So you can never satisfy them. And that's exactly how it's all played out. I mean, this is just from the activist playbook, basically. But now they control enormous amounts of funds. They claim to control over $30 billion in investment money globally. And they managed to put 3 members on the board of ExxonMobil last year. So they've made great inroads. It's been an effective strategy, mainly because CEOs and corporate management teams are afraid of them and have just decided to play their game with them every year and spend millions of dollars producing these glossy sustainability reports and admittedly have made some changes to their operations that have had the effect of reducing emissions and putting more minorities and women on corporate boards, which is a good thing, and revising the bonus structure for their senior executives, which has also been a good thing in the shale industry to some extent. And so the question becomes whether the costs or the benefits outweigh the costs. Mr. Musk was delisted. He's the man who created the most successful electric vehicle company on earth. Let's all remember. And last week, the S&P Dow Jones company delisted his company from its listing or its index of responsible ESG companies. At the same time, and what really I think set Mr. Musk off, Dow Jones, S&P Dow chose to put 5 additional oil companies onto the index, right? And ExxonMobil's in the top 10. And that really set him off. And so the question I think that Musk is raising is whether these ESG ranking systems are really legitimate, whether they are truly an indicator of a company's environmental and social and governance performance. And the reasons for the delisting that were offered by S&P Dow Jones, I think, were, very specious, frankly. And some people I reached out to for quotes on the article said that they believe politics is behind it, since Musk is, in the process of taking over the Democratic Party's favorite messaging social media platforms in Twitter, that this is kind of retaliation for that. I don't know. It's hard to know either way, but there certainly are those suspicions out there. And I just think it's really very interesting that the wealthiest man on earth is now decided not just to acquire Twitter, but take on the whole ESG rubric. And, I think at the end of the day, that'll probably be a positive thing for us all.
Irina, I'm not familiar with ESG ranking, let's say variables that they consider for analyze companies, but I'm not sure you are. But no, but
nobody really is, I think. No, this has been said. There has been criticism about all these standards and people calling for, standards, unified standards for ESG requirements to companies, regardless of their, of their business, and too general or too weak or too unclear, too unproductive, really.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to recognize that doing these things dramatically can increase a company's administrative costs. When I was in the consulting world 10 years ago, the firm I was with made millions of dollars helping companies produce these annual sustainability reports, which brag about all the great things you're doing in these realms. And
so it's a good business.
It's a heck of a business. And the real scandal in this really is that there are, other than, in addition to S&P Dow Jones, there are several other companies who also do these index ranking systems, but then they turn around and say, well, we can get you on the list if you'll just pay us a bunch of money to create your sustainability report, right? So they're also consulting companies. And it's really kind of a cottage industry that is, it's self-sustaining and it's not going to go away. And so Tesla and Elon Musk can either decide to try to conform their management practices to these artificial metrics that have been created, or he can continue to lash out whenever he's punished by one of these index services.
I understand Tesla was, sorry, Armando.
No problem.
I understand that Tesla was removed because it had no emission reduction commitments.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. So if they were talking about the beginning of the process, mining and the batteries rejection, so this is something reasonable, but emissions.
Right. Yeah. So Musk's argument is that, well, my gosh, my whole company is an emissions reduction company. If you accept the proposition, the argument, and I don't necessarily accept it, that electric vehicles are less polluting to the environment from cradle to grave than most ICE, internal combustion engine automobiles are, then you have to say that Tesla, its entire business is modeled around that. Why should Tesla, given that, have to, spend millions of dollars conforming its practices to these artificial metrics that are somewhat arbitrary and very difficult to truly measure? When it can point to its performance, its actual performance as a company. And I think that's a very strong argument. But what happened to Tesla was the day it was delisted, its stock price fell by 7%. Now, the overall market was way down, but just by 4%. So you have to think some of that drop was due to its being delisted from this index. And why should any company have its economic value damaged like this for failing to conform bunch of metrics that are not required by law or regulation and that are so incredibly difficult to truly measure? And I think that's a very legitimate question that we all should be asking. It shouldn't just be Elon Musk objecting to this. The whole corporate world should have been objecting to this for 16 years.
Yeah, it's not reasonable. Irina, on May 12, 2022, this year, Elon Musk said hydrogen is the most dumb thing I could possibly imagine for energy storage. What do you see in this sentence?
He's been talking against hydrogen for a very long time. He's been saying it's dumb. I expect it's done because it's expensive and it's really commercially unviable. Just look at all these commitments being made about green hydrogen production capacity in Europe. They're planning 40 gigawatts of green energy production capacity. What was it in Australia? Help me here, David. Which company was it? One of the big energy players said they'll be making massive amounts of green hydrogen.
Yeah, that's Chevron. I'm pretty sure that's Chevron.
No, it was and an Australian company.
Karun.
Yes.
Karun.
Karun.
Never mind. But a lot of promises.
Woodside Energy.
Woodside was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably. Thanks. But the truth is that I don't see a lot of green hydrogen capacity being built anywhere but in the Middle East, where there are specific climatic circumstances, a lot of sun, a lot of, guess what, cheap energy from oil and gas.
Right.
Yes, so for them it's a kind of diversification for Qatar and Saudi Arabia, but for Europe, I don't see it happening. I mean, it could happen literally if they pour all the billions needed for that. But as an energy storage, you don't just have to think about the wind and solar that will power the electrolysis for the production of green hydrogen. You have to think about storage capacity. You have to think about pipelines. You can't just, there was this idea to store hydrogen in existing natural gas pipelines, which is impossible because hydrogen is corrosive. It needs to be stored in special containers, even if they're pipelines. So all these petty details, you might say, nobody's talking about them.
Yeah.
Well, it's like nobody's talking about the pesky details about ESG investing and how ESG is actually ESG investing and what it actually means.
Yeah. So, on hydrogen, if I was Musk, I'd be bad-mouthing it too. It's his main potential competitor.
And it's a potential competitor with fuel cell cars, yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right. But on the point about it being expensive, we're seeing these massive price increases now for electric vehicles and pretty much every electric vehicle maker because of the skyrocketing prices of the minerals they have to have. And so they're becoming extremely expensive as well. And this whole strategy that the Greens have had now of artificially jacking up the price of fossil fuel energy so to make these vehicles and wind and solar more competitive is failing because they're having to raise the prices of the supposed replacements for the fossil fuels. So they're going to have to try some other tactic now.
And remember that hydrogen is not a primary energy; it's a consequence energy.
Right.
Yeah, and compete with batteries, electric batteries for the, as you said, David, with electric vehicles. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, hydrogen, I mean, it's interesting. It is interesting, but as Irina points out, you have it to replace gas engines with hydrogen engines, right? You have all this infrastructure that you're going to have to build out, right? You can't just use, as she points out, you can't use the existing natural gas pipeline system. You're going to have to put in a whole network of hundreds of thousands of new pipelines that the environmentalists already oppose today.
Sure.
And the gas stations are going to have to be converted to hydrogen. And, it's hundreds of trillions of dollars of infrastructure.
Yeah, because it's very flammable.
Right. Yeah. It's another one of these things that can be a niche alternative, kind of like natural gas vehicles have been. But to think it's going to displace all these fossil fuel cars is just irrational and impractical. Those are my big words for the day. Irrational and impractical. It describes our whole energy world.
Yeah. Politely, I might add.
Yeah,
quite politely.
That's right. So let's send to Elon Musk a good day and say to him to stay calm because another.
And keep fighting.
Yeah.
Keep fighting.
Stay
He's
calm
on the
and
right
keep
track.
fighting.
Exactly. His mind is in the right place.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you so much for this nice conversation this Monday, Irina and David.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Always
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
Have a great
Have a
week.
good day. You too. Bye-bye.